Good morning, children. Students, today we are going to discuss the fifth poem from the book Beehive, and the title of the poem is A Legend of the Northland, and it is written by Phoebe Cary. So, first of all, we'll know about the poetess Phoebe Cary. Phoebe Cary was born on 4th of September 1824 in Ohio. She was an American poetess. She wrote many poems which were appreciated worldwide. She was very famous poetess and American poetess, right? Born on 4th of September 1824, and she took her last breath on 31st July 1871. Students, The Legend of the Northland, it's a ballad. Ballad is a poem narrating story in a song. So it's like a poem which is narrating a story. This is a short story which is narrated in the form of a poem. It is a part of folk culture of Europe which is passed by one generation to another generation orally. Okay, so the message is transferred from one generation to another generation, right? So it's a ballad. ये एक ballad है which is narrating story. Ballad क्या होता है? It's a narrating story in a song. Poem narrating story in a song. Right. This poem narrates the legend of an old lady who angered Saint Peter because of her greed. So students, this poem, it narrates. क्या है इसमें? It narrates the legend. Now here legend means old traditional story. Story of an old lady who angered, जिसने सेंट पीटर को angry किया था because of her greed. Due to her greed, she just made Saint Peter angry, right? And this all happened in the Northland. That's why it is titled as A Legend of the Northland, a story, old traditional story of Northland. Let us see the theme, main idea presented in this poem. The main idea of writing the legend of the Northland is to instill in the minds of children the value of kindness, generosity, and charity, irrespective of who the person is. Otherwise, one would have to face the consequences. So, basically, the main idea that is depicted in this poem is to instill in the minds of children the value of kindness, generosity, and charity. We all should have these values of kindness, right? Of helping others, of charity, of being generous, irrespective of who the person is, irrespective like who the person is जिसको आप help कर रहे हो, whether he is rich, he is poor, or whosoever he is, we should be kind. Okay, so just to imbuild these values in children, it is written, this poem is written, right? And if we don't do so, if we don't help others, we have to face the consequences, we have to face the results. Okay, so it says that we all should be kind enough to others. If we can help, we should help, right? Otherwise we have to face the problems. Okay, so that is the main theme of this poem. So let's start with the poem now. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. So first of all, let's see Northland. Like it's an area near North Pole where days are short because sun's rays reach for a very little time. Here in this place, days are short. Okay, and during winter, duration of night is longer and days are shorter. Okay, this is general that nights are longer and days are short, right? They are shorter. Okay, so this stanza, in this stanza the poet introduces the place from where the story is derived. Okay, यहाँ पे फर्स्ट स्टैंजा में प्लेस बताया गया है जहाँ पे स्टोरी डिराइव हुई है. Okay, so the place is Northland. Okay, where days are short and nights are long, right? And it's difficult to sleep for so many hours in night there because nights are longer. Okay, so in the first stanza the place Northland is described. Okay, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. So, in this stanza, the poet, has given a short description of the people of Northland. Okay, how do they live? What do they wear and all? Okay, so she says that when snow falls, you all know when snow falls, people like sledging. Now, what is sledging? Sledging is like, as you can see in the picture, they're reindeers that are harnessed to a cart, sort of. Reindeers को harness किया जाता है, बांधा जाता है to cart, where people just sit at the back and they enjoy the weather there. Okay, and these reindeers, these animals are also used to carry goods from one place to another during snowy times, right? Okay, so they just like sledging. Okay, and reindeers are harnessed is like tied. Okay, बांधा जाता है उनको. Okay, and little children, they wear woolen clothes like we do, right? We wear woolen clothes during winters, right? Same way they wear woolen clothes, and those little children, they look like bear cubs. Okay, bear cubs, bear, babies of bear. Okay, so they look like that in those furry clothes. Furry, you all know fur clothes, like soft clothes, the soft hair of animals, like. Okay, so they wear those clothes and they look like bears cubs. Cubs means babies. Okay, now let's see the next part. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it is true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. So, here the poetess is saying that elders there used to tell their children these curious stories. Okay, one of the which is this. Okay, so वहाँ के elders, they tell their children these stories, curious stories, although the poet thinks that they aren't true. But as a child, she feels that they have good message in them. Okay, so although we may say that they are not true, but they have good messages in them, they have good morals in them. Okay, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale and this story to you. Okay, so basically it's a short story. As I've told you, it's a ballad. Okay, so let's see. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it, preaching just as he did, So, from here we have started that story. Just see. So, once, when the good Saint Peter, like, okay, who's Saint Peter? He was a follower of Christ, Jesus Christ, right? He lived in the world below. Now, world below means earth. He lived on the earth, right? And he walked about it. He used to walk and preach is like, giving good lessons to everyone, teachings of Jesus Christ, right? Just as he did, so he used to, he walked through and he used to preach, right? He used to preach about Jesus Christ to everyone, about good things, about being kind to everyone, right? So one day he came to the door of a cottage. So he was just walking around and he came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. Okay, so he stopped. Suddenly he just came to the door of a cottage. Cottage is like small house, wooden house. Okay, and while he was traveling round the earth, he just stopped there. Where? What did he see? Where a little woman was making cakes. So there was a little woman there who was making cakes, right? She was making cakes and she was baking them on the hearth. Hearth is like fireplace, as you can see in the picture that is given, fireplace. So she was just making cakes and she was baking these cakes on the hearth. Okay, and being faint, obviously he has traveled so lot, right? So he was a bit hungry and he was like fainting. He had become weak. Okay, so and being faint with fasting, that means he didn't have food for a long time, since a long time, right? So he became weak and he was with fasting, and for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one, right? So saint just asked that woman to give one single cake to him as he was hungry. So what did he do? He just asked that lady, उन्होंने lady से पूछा, just asked her to give him a single cake, right? Because she was making, she was just baking cakes. So Saint asked her to give him a, a small cake, a single cake, right? As he was hungry, right? As he was hungry. So what did she do? So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. So what did she do? She just made a very little cake. उन्होंने क्या किया lady ने? She just made a very little cake. But as it baking lay is like when it was being baked, जब वो bake हो रहा था, she looked at it and she thought that it was too large to give away. To give away to whom? To give it to the saint. Okay, जैसे वो bake हो रहा था, she thought that it's very large for giving it away. Okay, therefore she needed another. Okay, needed is like when you need that flour, na, just to make your, cakes and all, right? So she just needed another and still a smaller one, but it looked when she turned it over as large as the first had done. So first one she found it large enough, right? And when she needed another, same way she found that it was also as large as the first one. वो भी उतना ही बड़ा था जितना first one was there, right? So she thought that it was too big or large to give away. Again she thought so. So she didn't want to give a large piece of cake to the saint because it was for free, right? It was to be given for free. It was just like charity, na? So this shows the selfish nature of that women, right? Then what did she do? Then she took a tiny scrap of dough. Tiny scrap is very small amount of dough. Okay, dough you all know, right? Okay, that she just took that dough, tiny scrap, small amount of dough. Okay, and rolled it flat. Okay, dough is like you have that thing now from which cakes, or that flour from which cakes are made. Okay, so she just took a tiny piece, tiny small small amount of that dough and rolled it flat. और उसको कैसा कर दिया? रोल करके फ्लैट कर दिया, बिल्कुल just flat, and baked it thin as a wafer, or as a wafer bana diya. Wafer is so thin, you all know wafers, right? They are so thin. So she just rolled it and made it so thin, just like a wafer. But she couldn't part with even that. But do you know, she couldn't part with that also. That means she couldn't give that also. उनका उतना भी देने का उनका मन नहीं हुआ, right? For she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away. So she was like that, when I use my cakes for my consumption, मतलब when I take these by myself, like जब मैं खुद I just use them, they seem small, they seem too small when I eat of them myself, right? But when I want to give away them, they are looking large. Okay, right? So जब वो खुद consume करते हैं, right, they seem small. Okay, but जब उन्होंने कहीं देना है, so they are looking so large. Okay, so what did she do? She put them on the shelf. जो उनका shelf था, जो उनका rack था, she just kept all the cakes in there. वहाँ पे उन्होंने वो cakes रख दिए. Good Saint Peter grew angry. That means that lady, that woman, right, she didn't give anything to Saint Peter, right? Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint, right? So at that time Saint Peter grew angry. उन्हें बहुत गुस्सा आया, because he was so hungry and he was going to faint, right? And that lady could not give a single cake to him. That's why he got annoyed, right? And surely a woman was enough to make him angry. Okay, so this lady made this saint angry, and he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter, and fire to keep you warm. Okay, so Saint said that you are far too selfish, that you are very selfish to live like a human, to have food and shelter, that you don't deserve all these facilities, you don't deserve to live like a human, right? You don't deserve to have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm. Okay, because he was angry, right? So he said you don't deserve all these things, you don't deserve to live like, dwell is like to live like a human, right? So what did he do? So now the saint cursed her. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard dry wood. Have you seen a woodpecker? Right? What does it do? It just, looks for search for food here and there in the wood by, picking its, beak here there, right? By making holes there, searching for food. So saint cursed her that now you have to build your own house, now you have to get your scanty little food by making holes in the dry wood, just like a woodpecker, right? This was the curse given by the saint to that lady, that now you have to search for your own food by making holes in the dry wood. Okay, then she went up through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. So what was the curse given by Saint Peter? That the lady turned into a woodpecker bird. Okay, so the lady turned into a bird, right? The lady got turned into a woodpecker by the curse given by the Saint Peter, right? So she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, right? She never spoke a word, and then out of the top flew a woodpecker. That means she just got changed into a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. She turned into a woodpecker, right? She had a scarlet cap on her head, right? So she was wearing a scarlet is like bright red colored cap. She was wearing that cap, right? So that cap remained same. Okay, and that was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burned black as coal in the flame, right? All her clothes were burned, that means they became black. But that red cap, as you can see in the picture, the whole body is black, but it is having a red cap. Woodpecker is having a red cap, and that cap was the one which she was wearing. It remained the same, right? And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood. So every country schoolboy, right? So schoolboys have seen her in the wood, in the forest, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. So she's still seen in the wood, in the forest, where she's always boring. Boring is like making holes in the wood to search for food. So, students, did you see how this lady was cursed for not being kind enough to that saint, for not helping him when he was in need, when he was hungry and he was going to faint, right? So, the lady was cursed for not helping the saint, right? So, in this way, we get a message that we all should be kind enough, we should be kind, generous, and we should believe in charity, right? Whosoever the person is, whether he is rich, whether he is poor, whether he is a saint or anyone, we should be helpful, we should be kind. Otherwise, like this lady, we have to face the consequences, we have to face the results. Okay, so we should be kind enough. Okay, so here our ballad comes to an end. Isn't it a beautiful story in the form of a poem and a ballad, right? So it's a beautiful poem with a beautiful message that we all should follow in our life, right? So students, now let's see the poetic devices that are used in this poem. The most striking element in the poem is that first two four-line stanzas called quatrains have no end punctuation, like we have seen in the first two four-line stanzas, right? First two stanzas of four lines, that there's no punctuation marks at the end, right? No end punctuation, that means no full stop. Okay, the poet has used enjambment. Now what is that? Combination of a sentence without a pause beyond the end of a line, couplet or stanza. So it's a continuation of a sentence without a pause. बिना pause के आपका sentence continue करते हैं beyond the end of a line. That means even the line has ended but still you continue the part without using any pause. Okay, assonance is used, repetition of vowel sounds, away, away, the first two words of this poem. Now, consonants, repetition of consonant sounds, swift, sledge, snow, we have seen, right, in the second paragraph, second stanza. Allusion, reference to something historical like saint. We have used saint here, Peter Saint, right? Saint Peter. So, allusion is when we are talking about any literary, historical or literary person or event, right? Similarly, we have used a comparison is being made using like or as. The children look like bears, cubs, black as coal. So here comparison is made using like or as, right? Repetition, boring, 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 this we have seen. So these are some of the poetic devices that are used in this poem. So students, here we come to the end of the poem, right? I hope you all have understood the poem, and I hope you all will follow the message that you have got from this poem. Read the poem again thoroughly, go through all the word meanings, go through each line properly. For any doubt, please contact me. So I'll see you all in your next class. Till then, just take care, students. Be safe.